This is Aaron Levine, LG Insurance Agency, with another episode of the And Insurance Podcast, hanging out with my good friend, Joseph Asterita, Asterita Associates, attorney at law. Welcome again to the show. What have you been up to? I haven't seen you in a while.
Been busy.
I had to call him to get him on the podcast to actually get to hang out with my friend. But instead of drinking vodka or tequila, he's drinking water. And I've got my good old wrecked mug. I got to get some new LG tumblers. I got to place an order. Strike Guards, if you're watching, you get to place an order. If you're not watching, you're beat. I'm going to order from somebody else. So we were chatting the other day. We wanted to reconnect. We'll do a quick intro about who you are. We can definitely link back to the other episode. I think the last time you were on, I think we were talking about commercial leases. I think we did like the tenant-landlord relationship and how the lease fills in on that and how people get themselves properly covered for insurance when you have a lease in place and are following the rules of the lease, because that's important. I think that's what we were talking about last time. I think this time we're going to go take a different turn, and we're going to go into a little bit of estate planning and some trusts. And anytime you hear the word trust, you think rich people problems, right? But there's other trusts out there that normal people should think about when they're putting their estate plans together, and then, kind of dive into that and how normal people do their estate planning. So give me a background of who Joey Bones is, also known as Joey Chili Knees, and
I don't know if we have time on the podcast.
Let's dive into. We don't have to tell a Joey Chili Knees story. We'll bring that up separately. But let's go into a little bit about how Asterita Associates is set up, where you're located, and then let's talk about some estates and trusts.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me on the show again.
Of course.
Yeah. So I'm the principal attorney and owner of Asterita Associates. We're a full-service law firm. We're located in Staten Island, New York, where I have an office, and in Red Bank, New Jersey. I primarily spend my time in my Red Bank office, but we have fully staffed offices at both locations. Our main areas of practice are wills, trusts, and estates matters, probate administration, real estate matters, both residential and commercial, and business-related matters. Several attorneys in the office, fully staffed team, and our concept is lawyer for life. We want to be there for our clients throughout the various phases of life. These areas of practice tend to cross over quite a bit, right? So if you own some real estate, you're buying a home, you can live there, maybe you'll sell it or buy that over the course of your life. You need estate planning, generally speaking, to make sure you're going to pass those assets to your heirs properly, and make sure if you have kids in particular that they're going to be cared for and things of that nature. And we want to be there throughout those various phases. So whether you're buying, selling, if you own a business, managing a business, buying or selling one, I found that these areas of practice were great areas to focus on, because those were the primary needs of my clients.
Right.
I'm doing this almost, it's got to be 24, 25 years now.
Getting old, man.
Tell me about a lot of grays here. A lot of grays and less of this.
My kids only see the grays when they're like, if I'm sitting on the couch and they're like standing on something. Daddy, your hair's getting gray, but you can't see it because I'm tall enough. Nobody knows what's going on up there.
Yeah, I don't have that luxury, unfortunately. It takes a toll on the hair over time. But still here, still swinging. And, the idea is I've seen so many of my clients go through so many stages of life.
Right.
And when, my first-time home buyers who I represented 20 plus years ago have come back to me for their sales and their, their business needs, whether they were buying or selling a business, or they had a family member who was, or, if they have children and they need to pass on their assets, to make sure that we're planning properly and succession planning for their business and things of that nature. They all kind of cross over. So that's kind of our model.
I mean, having the trusted professionals, within your quote-unquote inner circle, so to speak, are going to be with you forever. I mean, so the Attorney for Life motto, helping people with their first-time home purchase, which has to be god-awful and annoying. I love dealing with people when they're buying their first homes when it comes to the insurance process, because you get a lot of people that want to be educated and understand, and then make good decisions for themselves. Other people that want to be smarter than me and learn off the internet, they can go do it their way.
Google told me.
Right? And especially with interest rates and insurance, quick tangent. I was looking up a house that's for sale in my neighborhood, and I was on one of the popular websites. I forget which one it was. And the home price was, we'll call it $3 million on this home price. I'm not buying it. And then as you scroll down, it's like your monthly estimated mortgage is
Right.
$17,000 a month based on whatever calculation they're doing. Then I'm like, all right, let me look a little further. It says estimated insurance premium $800 per year. I'm like,
Not bad.
I'm like, first off, even if you have a 800 square foot home in the state of New Jersey, you can't get an insurance premium of $800. And when you have a 6,000 square foot home, it's surely not going to be $800. It's
Yeah.
going to be more like $800 a month if you're lucky. Right, $8,000 for the year is more reasonable for a 6,000 square foot home.
Sounds about right.
1 mile to the coast, but the internet tells people that it should be 800, and that's their expectation. So, recreating expectations is always a good time, especially in our wild market. So, how is the real estate market doing right now? Are you guys busy? You're seeing a lot of transactions.
Yeah, we're still very busy. I'm fortunate enough to be very busy in my practice. I know, the market in general has slowed down a bit. One of the problems that we see most often in this area, in particular where we are, Monmouth County, Ocean County, like the inventory is just not there.
Right.
People are not listing their houses for sale, and maybe they're in a 3% mortgage they got 2 or 3 years ago, and why move? To
So
replace
hard.
that, where are you going to go to, all those questions. So
Right.
I still see many buyers per available home. Like
Sure.
if you have a home in a desirable area, it's still going pretty quick.
Right.
And still I see clients on the buy side who are giving up things like waiving appraisals and limiting their inspection rights and things of that nature just to get the deal.
Right.
We're still seeing that quite a bit. Overall, the volume's a little bit down, but I'm not much off my pace from last year.
It's phenomenal. I mean,
Yeah.
2 years when we started these conversations of how crazy the real estate market is, we all thought it was going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's done nothing but continue to go up the hill,
Yeah.
even with interest rates going to 7% or wherever the heck they are today. Hopefully at some point they're going to come back down because I do need to refinance. But that's another story. Anyway, wills, trusts, and estates, right? Everybody should have some directive for end of life, for retirement, death, children. I think it's super important. Personally, I think everybody should do it, or else they wind up, everything becomes a mess, right? If you own anything, it becomes a mess because you're tied up with the courts for God knows how long.
Yeah,
'Cause
definitely possible.
we insure some of these, so we have to sell, and the courts require bonds, probate bonds that we'll issue. And I've got bonds going 3-4 years now
Yep.
or longer for just estates not being cleared up, people not knowing where to go and where kin is and how to get rid of assets. It's out of control, but properly documenting it is the vehicle to help you do that, right?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, administering an estate when you have an estate plan in place and a clear path for your heirs and family to follow,
Right.
is invaluable. I mean, and like you mentioned earlier, estate planning isn't necessarily for the uber wealthy or the rich. Like,
Right.
I can pretty much in general give you an idea as to where your stuff's going to go and who's going to inherit it and roughly how. It may not be the way you want
Right.
or to whom you want. As many cases people find out, when they dealing with the estate of a loved one or someone close to them and thought they were getting everything and they just aren't. Because the law might say something quite different. And the other thing I'll say is, I have my practice both in New Jersey and in New York. It's very, very different, the process to administer an estate, whether by probate, which is when you have a will, or administration when there is none. Generally the process in New Jersey is somewhat easier, and for that reason, many people try to take it on by themselves. I can't tell you how many phone calls I get when they start that process because the beginning steps are relatively straightforward
Right.
most of the time. But then I get the calls, I just got appointed to my uncle's estate, now what?
Right.
And that's the question. And often we're trying to untangle a mess they've created on their own. My general advice is seek the advice of professionals, like most things, early in the
I mean,
process.
LegalZoom isn't sufficient enough for
No,
me to get my job done.
DIY, applies, the same rules kind of apply for most things when it comes to that. But generally, just even if you do a consultation, like we offer free consultations in my office. So, come in, sit down, have a talk. You want to take it on your own, feel free at that point, but at least have the discussion.
Right. So where do the trusts come in to play here, right? So, okay, I consult with you, Joe, and we write a will, right? And then we have there's a medical directive in there. There's the DNRs put in there, right? All the good stuff.
Generally, yeah. I mean, they're different documents, but yeah.
There's things that get put in there,
Yeah.
right? And then there's other ways, to protect the children in trust, and then there's
Yep.
other. So go talk to me about some of these trust ideas.
Sure. I mean, basic fundamentals everybody really should have to start off with. So a last will and testament, a power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney or healthcare proxy in New York, it's called, or an advanced directive of healthcare. That's the living will, right? Those are the basic fundamentals that really everybody should have, regardless of your level of wealth or family and things of that nature. But yeah, you can layer trust on top of that as an estate planning tool, and we do that very often, whether it's within your last will and testament or a standalone type of trust. And there are a varying amount and types of trusts that you can apply. Generally, the main two categories are revocable and irrevocable, right? Pretty, as they say, revocable, you can change, modify, take it back, move assets in and out of it. No tax consequence to using it. But the advantages of a revocable trust are to really streamline your estate and what happens when you pass away. Unlike an estate proceeding, whether by probate through a will or without one, assets that are passed by a revocable trust to their heirs don't have to go through that process generally. The trust says what happens. So, if you say I'm leaving, X, Y, and Z assets to my kids, then the trust is self-operating, doesn't have to be probated in court or approved by a judge at that point. The successor trustee steps into your shoes, takes over, administers the trust.
So if we'll say I'm of retirement age, my children are grown, and the goal is to pass things down, right? My only asset is my home. Do I take my home and then put it into a revocable trust?
Yep.
And then it's much more streamlined.
It's a very
end of life,
without a doubt. I mean, it's a very common way of estate planning.
Right.
And if you retitle your home, and we could do that by a deed transfer. I mean, there's some complexities to how you do it.
What if there's a mortgage on the home? Do the mortgage companies allow it, or it has to be?
They generally don't like it, but
or?
I'm practicing about 25 years, and I haven't seen a bank do anything about it. Okay. There's some rules that apply to that, and it's different in which depending upon which state you're in for where the asset is located, with the house in this case. But we very often transfer homes, for people into their revocable trust. They can continue to be in charge of their own affairs using a revocable trust. And when they pass away, the home will then pass to whomever the trust says without having to go through probate and getting someone appointed and spending a ton of money and time.
Why doesn't everybody do this?
Great question.
You make it sound so easy. I'm sure there's some complexities in there, but it just sounds like a no-brainer. It sounds like I should go put my home in a revocable trust right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the barriers to it are people think it is, it's overwhelming. I've talked to a lawyer. A lawyer's going to talk to me in lawyer speak. It's not going to make a whole lot of sense. I don't really understand it. Just sitting down and having a frank conversation, almost like this, about what this means and what the pros and cons are, and there are to every kind of estate plan you put together. Would be really beneficial in determining whether or not to go forward with a revocable trust in your plan. A lot of my clients like it just for the privacy of it, because probate and administration proceedings are public record. Right. Anybody can look that stuff up, see who's in charge, who's getting what, and that kind of thing. Revocable trusts are private instruments.
And there's no tax consequences until the sale of the asset.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, with revocable trust in general, there's generally speaking, better tax advantage to getting assets that way than by passing it through an irrevocable trust, for example. There's a lot of complex rules and things with tax basis and things of that nature which come into play. But revocable trusts, are generally great estate planning alternatives. They're called testamentary alternatives, right?
Okay.
So instead of passing something through your estate, having to go through that probate process and things of that nature, you can pass it directly to your heirs through your own private instrument. Doesn't have to be approved by a court, and it will be distributed and handled in the way you determine, not how someone in black robes whom you've never met decides how things should be done.
Right. So we set up, and I'm just still using my single home as the asset. There's other asset classes. So if I set up my home in a revocable trust and I'm the administrator while I'm still living, right? The administrator then can change upon my death based on how the will is written.
Well, if we're talking about using a trust for this purpose, right? Then the trust is the person in charge of it's the trustee. So with revocable trust, you can be your own trustee.
Right.
So you're in charge of your affairs while you're alive. You can move assets in and out of it. It doesn't have to be just your real estate. You can name the trust, retitle your home or a bank account or an investment account, generally speaking, to the trust. And then you continue to operate it as if it was you. It's looked at as an alter ego and a pass-through entity for tax purposes as well. It's relatively simple. Generally, everyday life doesn't change with respect to these assets by doing this. It's really just setting it up in the first place, just getting it in place.
I mean, it's something that sounds so easy to do and sounds, like anybody at retirement age, I hate saying end of life. I'm like I'm like, you're dying, you're dead. Is your life insurance bill paid? Are we gonna cash out? But
Right.
you want to put your life insurance proceeds into a trust also, in a lot of cases, especially when you have young children, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are particular trusts designed for that purpose,
Okay.
and we see that a lot with people who have, more wealthy, who look at more of an estate tax problem they may have. Luckily, in states like New Jersey, the estate tax, depending upon year of death, has been abolished for the most part.
Okay.
So most people now in New Jersey don't have an estate tax problem, generally speaking. But the federal estate tax laws are still out there, and if you have certain assets over a certain level, now your family is going to be subject to an estate tax, right? And in New York, there's an estate tax actually as well, still in place. So to plan for that, sometimes clients will look at, well, how do I ensure that there's going to be some liquid cash available that's not going to increase my tax liability, right, for the estate, but provide my family with liquid money in order to pay estate tax bills so they don't have to start selling everything and paying the tax bill within 9 months, right? Which is when that stuff is due after you pass away.
It's a short period of time.
Yeah, it is. And especially when you're grieving, you lost a loved one, a parent or something like that. So we see a great way is using something like an irrevocable life insurance trust, which you can fund with a life insurance policy, which provides a death benefit to the trust. You don't actually own this yourself.
Right.
You're gifting it to a trust, and the trust collects the death benefit when you pass on.
Right.
And what happens is, if you follow the rules, then that money comes into the trust and does not add to your estate for estate tax purposes.
But the trust can pay the estate tax.
Exactly. The trust can be used to administer, pay liabilities and things of that nature. So it provides a whole level of flexibility.
And then anything that's left over after the estate tax is paid
could be administered according to your wishes, not to somebody in black robes you don't know.
So easy. It's so easy.
Yeah. The obstacles I see with people when we say it's relatively easy, in concept, right?
Right.
But,
there's got to be a way to dumb it down, right? Like when you use terms like irrevocable trust, it just sounds very complex. Right? Just there's nothing easy about it. There's got to be a way to just dumb it down for the layperson to put this in place. Here's A, B, and C. Here's what you're going to do, and that's it.
I use a lot of flow charts, like my little diagrams. My handwriting's not great, but usually that kind of breaks through that barrier for most people.
So you have to tell your social media people. You need to do one of those the hand drawing videos.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about with the doodle sketches to flow this out in very simple terms. I think it'll be a great YouTube video for you. It'll work well on your Instagram.
Well, first I need the handwriting instructor so people can actually read.
No, it's like a computer that does the doodle graphic for you.
Oh, that's
right?
perfect.
They make everything instead. I think it'd be totally cool because it's got a 1, 2, 3. Here's your 3 steps, and this is how you're going to do it. But then if your children are minors, you have to have a different trust set up.
Yeah, and we do that a lot in trusts, and even within last will and testaments, we include trust provisions for minors. So who wants like an 18-year-old when they become an adult to inherit, $1 million or whatever it is you're leaving behind?
Sure.
If that happened to me when I was 18, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. But we could stagger that out over time with some very straightforward trust writing, either within your will or within a standalone type of trust.
So is there an expense to maintain a trust?
There is, and it depends on what kind of trust it is. Right. When you talk about revocable trust, really isn't much of an expense, if at all, like on your daily life, because it's a pass-through. It doesn't affect your tax picture. Right. If you're your own trustee, there's no third party who wants to be paid for their services as a trustee, and things of that nature. But while you're alive and managing your own affairs, for under that kind of scenario, there really isn't an annual cost to it, right? But other types of trusts, irrevocable trusts, when you're giving things away, and you're setting up third-party trustees and things of that nature, there's potentially other costs as go along. Maybe tax returns need to be filed, appraisals of property need to be done, gift tax returns might need to be filed, and things of that nature. So there are costs to administering those over time.
Right.
Yeah.
So if somebody doesn't want a family member appointed as a trustee, right, or the administrator of the estate, do you ever take on that responsibility?
I do on rare occasion.
Okay.
Most of the time, if I'm asked to do that, I only consent to do it for clients of mine that I've had relationships for long periods of time, or I've known the family, like those clients I tell you I've been helping for 20 years or whatnot. I sometimes am asked by someone who's just met me to take on that role, and generally I'll decline and encourage
You
them.
mean
to
you
pick
don't want to
somebody
deal with their
else.
family? You don't want to deal with the family members?
Well, it's
You need to hire there needs to be a provision for a bodyguard.
Right.
You know, in there.
there's got to be a comfort level, right? If I know the family and I'm familiar with them, most of them, will consent. Not it won't be an egregious kind of scenario.
Sure.
Remember, I'd be stepping into a scenario where someone's passed away, so that emotions and tensions can run high, particularly when it comes to money and death and things of that nature.
Sure.
So I try to steer clear of the those situations when I'm not more of a long-term fixture of the family and that kind of thing.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Just imagine, it's
It's fun.
another great YouTube video for you to create. The family's chasing after you because you're only following the will the way it was written.
Yeah,
and,
try to avoid that as much as I can. Yeah.
And niece Judy was left out of something. And, tons of fun. So
Yep.
we've covered the children. We've covered the assets. Right? What cannot be put into a trust? Like what scenarios make it a little bit more sticky, and where does the court, if we do things right, we can get the assets and we can get the estate settled quickly. If we do things wrong, it can take years and years and years. In what scenarios are you kind of stuck in between?
Most often when I see people have long-term issues with the states, it's because one, they might own property in different states, right?
Okay.
So if you don't plan properly, let's say you own, a lot of our clients here in the Northeast have maybe a second home in Florida, for example, a condo, vacation home. Not incorporating that into your estate plan could be a difficult problem. In general, to collect assets outside of the estate in which you live, you have to administer your estate where you live and where your primary assets are, and then do the same thing in what's could be referred to as an ancillary proceeding in the state where that other asset is. So imagine now not only having to go through a probate or administration process in one state, you have to do that in a second state. And some states like Florida are more difficult, time-consuming in general, and more expensive to do that. And that can tie up an estate for months and months and months and cost thousands upon thousands of dollars.
Right.
See that all the time. Another way is setting up the plan but not actually funding it properly, which is, another thing I see happen, even with clients of mine whom I encourage to, okay, this is the plan, this is what we have to do. We're going to move these assets, but you have to go to your institutions and change how you own these accounts, or change the beneficiary designations on them. And a lot of people fall down in that point because they get busy with life or whatever it might be, and don't complete that process.
See, it's not going to happen to me syndrome.
Exactly. They get the docs, they put them in a drawer after I prepare them, and they sign them, and then they forget about it, which is a great thing to do, put it on autopilot, but just get things organized, get it done in one shot, and you should be good to go. But I see that all the time as another way to fall down. For example, if you have a minor child who's like 5 years old, let's say, and the plan is we're going to include in your last will and testament trust provisions so that that minor child's inheritance is going to be handled till they turn 30, and they're going to get income and have their assets managed for them to pay for their college and their health and all those type of things along the way. Leaving that child as a beneficiary on all the assets you're trying to actually have pass through that will not, properly fund that plan. Because then the assets are going to go to that child who's a minor, now needs a guardian appointed separately and independent from the rest of the estate plan to actually collect and administer those assets. And that's a lengthy, time-consuming, and expensive process, and is very restrictive on how a guardian can use those funds over time. Probably not what you had in mind when you set up your plan, right? Kind of things that most people don't really think about, unfortunately, sometimes until it's too late.
Right. So the only thing I'm doing is I'm like, do I have all my affairs in order?
I see the wheels turning right now.
My brain is working. I'm like, I've got the life insurance in place. I know I have the children's trusts. I'm like, whatever about my house, the bank owns most of it anyway. I'm like, what pieces am I missing? I'm like, this is why you're here, for free legal advice.
Oh, I get
it.
Right?
Like, that's why I've done 50 episodes of this podcast, because I get the greatest advice in the world by sharing it with our 200 viewers on YouTube. So piecing it all together is super important. And, making sure you have the life insurance is a great step, right? Getting the life insurance in place, making sure you have your will. Like, there's a lot of great steps, but you're right, tying it together, getting those end pieces done is super important. But now I'm like figuring out, I'm like, all right, I don't want to pay New Jersey estate tax. I don't want to pay federal. Well, you said no, New Jersey doesn't have it, but federally, where do I want to die? Like, where do I want to live and die to pay the least amount of taxes?
Wow.
What state in our greater continental United States? You said Florida was no good. New York is double tax, right? Where am I going?
Well, there's pros and cons to all of them. You know, New Jersey doesn't have that estate tax if you passed away after a certain date, but it does have an inheritance tax. So if you're leaving money to someone who's not, let's say, a direct descendant or a spouse, right?
Right.
So if you're leaving stuff to your spouses and your children in general in New Jersey, you're not going to pay an estate tax. But
Right.
if you're leaving it to your friend or a cousin, depending upon the relationship to you and what they fall into different classes of beneficiaries,
Right.
they're going to have to pay an inheritance tax. And where's that money coming from, right? What if you're leaving money to somebody who doesn't have money? Now it's got to come out of their inheritance, right? And you have to pay inheritance taxes in New Jersey within 8 months of passing away. Yeah, fun stuff. So, you know, unfortunately, it's not
No
a one-size-fits-all answer. I have to give
Right.
you the lawyer answer, right, to your
The
question.
yes, no, maybe. The
Yeah,
professional.
exactly.
I just paid you how much to tell me yes,
Yeah.
no, maybe? Thanks so much.
Yeah, but like, you know, Florida is a tough state in general, to administer an estate,
Right.
but there's no estate tax in Florida. So,
Okay.
you know, it all depends upon, you know, what your particular circumstances are and why you
Right.
need guidance when you're planning this stuff.
Right.
It's not a cookie cutter, one size fits
You're
all.
saying
answer,
we
unfortunately.
need an accountant sitting next to us right now to really dive into this and figure it all out.
Definitely helpful. Yeah, definitely helpful.
Depending on your tax bracket and everything else you have going on.
Sure.
There's so many moving parts. That's why we
Yeah.
consult with and use only the best professionals, being Joseph Joey Bones Asterita of Red Bank in Staten Island. So what else? What did I miss? What did we not touch on when it comes to wills, trusts, and estates right now?
Well, you covered a lot of it. I think the takeaway should really be estate planning is not for people who just are wealthy.
Right.
It's really for everybody, because the other stuff we mentioned earlier, like healthcare power of attorney and your power of attorney and your living will, that should be in place regardless if you have assets or not. So who's going to be in charge of your affairs if you can't handle them for yourself while you're alive, right? This is only for planning for stuff while you're alive with those three documents. Who's going to make your healthcare decision making, you know, and different people you can appoint to these various roles for different reasons. Some
Right.
people, in, like, let's say you want to appoint your children to do this and they're adults and they're maybe capable or not. Who has more business acumen, you know, and who's more in touch with what your spiritual wishes would have been or your long-term care wishes would have been.
Right.
You know, you can appoint people in various roles. If you don't have that in place, who are doctors and third parties going to look to make that decision for you?
Sure.
And if everybody's fighting over that choice, you know, they're going to go like this, okay, you figure it out, or have a judge tell me.
Right.
Nobody wants to be in the middle of a lawsuit with everybody fighting over what's best for mom or dad, for example. So they try to step out of that. So you can decide who's in charge and how your affairs would be handled, regardless if you have money or assets.
Right.
What about your care and your needs and your everyday? Who's going to handle your banking?
Right.
You
It's
know,
not
like-
just I'm dead, I don't care what happens anymore,
Right.
because it doesn't affect me. It's
Yeah.
if you're still alive and you need care and help and there's things going on, that's all part of this process,
Yeah.
right? If you need guardianship later in life, you know, how's that going to be set up and funded and
Who's it
taken
gonna
care
be?
of? Who's it going to be?
Yeah, you can make
Right.
those choices. You know, too often I get the call from, you know, a client who might be in their 50s or something, and mom or dad is 85.
Right.
And I need a power of attorney for mom or a healthcare proxy because she's in a nursing home and, you know, she has dementia and doesn't understand what's happening to her right now. I'm like, well, now you can't do that. If they don't have the capacity to understand what they're signing,
Right.
they really can't provide that type of intent and sign something like that. So, yeah, as we say with almost everything, right? Early planning is better.
Sure.
And setting those things up, you know, are just as important, if not more important, for life, you know, care than your estate for handling the stuff after you're gone.
Sure. That's what I say. The same thing when it comes to some of these insurances, right? Life insurance is great, but you're dead. Your disability insurance is what's going to keep you going
Great point.
for that period of time, or your long-term care insurance.
Yeah.
You know, I know my parents have very good long-term care
It's
insurance.
fantastic.
I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not going to come out of my pocket, and we're not going to have to worry about the 5-year waiting period for Medicaid to kick in for them to go into some home somewhere and then fall off into oblivion. You know, that it's paid for and taken care of, and it's been being paid for the past 25 years.
Yeah.
You know, so that we don't have to worry about it. And these are things that early planning is going to be much more beneficial for your needs later in life, or if an accident occurs and you need to access some of these things sooner. So
Yeah, without a doubt.
get your plans done with Joe. Call me for the life and disability insurance, and we will bring the accountant with us to make sure we understand how the estate is going to be settled. Joe, glad to have had you join me on the podcast again today. Great
been
information,
great.
great advice always. And let's go play some golf.
Let's do it.
Cool. Thank you.